We, the Vorax, pride ourselves on being the most logical species in the known universe. Our civilization spans 17 star systems, and we have catalogued over 300 sentient species. Most are primitive, barely worth the notation in our vast databases. But humans were different.
Captain Karax.
The survey team has returned from Earth, announced Lieutenant Zillar, his 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. They have brought samples. I swiveled my central body mass toward my eager subordinate. Samples? I thought I ordered observation only. What part of do not engage was unclear. No direct contact was made, Captain, Zillar clarified, his voice modulator vibrating with excitement. The team collected discarded items, things the humans no longer wanted. Typical. I'd spent 3 orbital cycles preparing this mission, and my crew still managed to misinterpret basic instructions. This is why we Vorthax don't typically allow the younger generations to participate in first contact scenarios. Too enthusiastic, too prone to bending protocols. Fine, bring these samples to the analysis chamber, I said, not bothering to hide the exasperation in my vocal patterns, and prepare the preliminary invasion schematics while you are at it. Yes, invasion. That was always the end goal with Class 7 planets like Earth. Resource-rich worlds with troublesome dominant species required careful management. Our standard approach: assess, infiltrate, destabilize, then conquer. Efficient, clean, logical. Right away, Captain, Zillar scurried off, leaving me to contemplate our next steps. The Earth assignment had seemed straightforward when the High Council selected me. Humans had developed crude spaceflight and primitive nuclear capabilities, always the warning signs of a potentially problematic species. Their constant warfare and environmental degradation indicated a lack of collective intelligence. The Council's decision was unanimous. Earth would be better managed under Vorax stewardship. I made my way to the analysis chamber, my 3 lower limbs clicking against the polished floor of our orbiting research vessel. The Relentless Inquiry was our newest science vessel, equipped with the most advanced stealth and research technology in the Vorax fleet. Hiding in Earth's orbit had been almost too easy. "Captain on deck," announced Science Officer Trillax as I entered. She gestured toward a table covered with various human artifacts. "Report," I commanded, moving closer to inspect the odd collection. These items were collected from locations humans call thrift stores and garage sales, explained Trillax. According to our research, these are places where humans discard still functional items they no longer desire. I picked up a small rectangular object. And this is a portable music device, approximately 15 Earth years outdated. Humans replace these technologies frequently. Wasteful, I noted. Evidence of their unsuitability for self-governance. Trillax nodded in agreement. We have collected 73 distinct items for analysis. The survey team selected a diverse sampling. I gestured to a colorful flat object leaning against the wall. And that, the visual representation. Humans call it a painting. I approached it, my ocular membranes adjusting to better analyze the strange item. It depicted a landscape, simplistic, obviously not meant for cartographic purposes. The colors were unusual, not accurate to any terrain I'd seen in our surveillance. Why would they create an incorrect representation of their environment? I wondered aloud. Trillax consulted her datapad. Our preliminary assessment suggests it serves no practical function. It appears to be decorative, decorative. The concept was almost foreign. Vorax design was purely functional, a waste of resources. "There's more," said Trillax, leading me to another table. "These bound paper collections contain markings. We believe they are narrative constructs. Story." I flipped through one, scanning the primitive symbols. "Fiction. Imaginary scenarios." "Precisely, Captain. Humans devote significant resources to creating things that aren't real." This confirmed our initial assessment. Any species that diverted valuable time and materials toward non-functional objects clearly lacked the maturity for interstellar community membership. "Begin the detailed analysis," I ordered. "I want a comprehensive report by the next solar rotation." 3 solar rotations later, I found myself staring at Trillax's report in disbelief. "This can't be correct," I said, my voice modulator barely containing my agitation. "Run the tests again." Trillax's posture stiffened. We have conducted the analysis 17 times, Captain. The results are consistent. The data before me defied all Vorax understanding of sentient development. The human artifacts displayed patterns we'd never encountered in any species at this technological stage. Show me, I demanded. Trelax led me back to the analysis chamber, now transformed into what looked like a bizarre museum of human items. The walls were covered with these paintings, the tables laden with books, sculptures, and various audio devices. We began with standard material analysis, Trelax explained. Expected results, primitive manufacturing, inefficient resource usage. But when we examined the content, she paused, her voice modulator emitting the Vorax equivalent of a nervous cough. Proceed, science officer. The emotional complexity encoded in these items exceeds our predictive models by 700. I scoffed. Impossible. See for yourself, Captain. Trelax handed me a small device with 2 fabric-covered extensions. Place these over your auditory receptors. Reluctantly, I complied. Immediately, my sensory system was flooded with organized sound patterns, what humans called music. The complexity was unexpected. Layered frequencies, deliberate dissonance and resolution, mathematical patterns that shifted in ways I couldn't predict. What is this? I demanded, removing the listening device. Humans call it jazz, Trelax said. A musical form built around improvisation within complex harmonic structures. Improvisation. The concept was almost offensive to Vor's sensibilities. We valued precision, repeatability. Yes, Captain, the performers create variations in real time responding to each other's input. I moved to the table of books, picking up the one I'd examined earlier. And these contain similar complexity. More so, said Trelax. We have analyzed over 43 distinct narrative styles. The humans call this particular one science fiction. It imagines encounters with non-Earth species. They imagine us? I felt a strange sensation in my central nervous cluster. In thousands of different ways, Captain. Some remarkably accurate, others wildly divergent from reality. I put down the book and moved to the paintings. One in particular caught my attention. Abstract shapes and colors that seemed to move despite being static. What purpose does this serve? I asked. Trelax's voice softened. As far as we can determine, it exists to evoke emotional and intellectual responses. To make other humans feel and think. Feel and think what? Precisely. That's just it, Captain. There's no singular correct response. The art appears designed to elicit varied individual reactions. I stared at the swirling colors, trying to process this information. You are suggesting these artifacts are communication tools with deliberately ambiguous meanings. Essentially, yes, and they devote enormous resources to creating, preserving, and experiencing them. Their largest structures are often dedicated to housing these objects. The implications were disturbing. Our entire assessment of human civilization had been based on their technological development, resource management, and conflict patterns. We'd completely overlooked this aspect of their culture. Show me more, I commanded. The next 12 rotations passed in a blur of human artistic exploration. I postponed all other duties, much to the High Council's irritation. Their increasingly urgent communications went unanswered as I immersed myself in humanity's creative output. The research team expanded their collection, retrieving more samples from Earth's digital networks. Films, music, literature, visual arts from all human cultures and time periods flowed into our analysis systems. Captain Carix, you need to see this, called junior analyst Frzax, interrupting my examination of what humans called poetry. I followed the young analyst to his workstation, where a visual recording played on the screen. What am I looking at? I asked. A human performance ritual called ballet, explained Frzax. Watch the precision of their movements. On the screen, humans moved in synchronized patterns, their bodies defying gravity in ways that seemed impossible for such physically limited creatures. They are communicating through controlled motion, I observed. Yes, but notice the emotional responses in the observing humans. Frzax enhanced the image, focusing on the faces of the audience. Their expressions showed a range of reactions, some leaking fluid from their ocular organs, others displaying the baring of teeth that indicated positive emotion. They are experiencing different responses to the same stimulus, I noted. Exactly, Captain. And look at this. Brzak switched to another recording. Humans engaged in a different movement pattern. This is called breakdancing. Completely different aesthetic, different cultural context, yet serving a similar function. I watched, fascinated as humans contorted their bodies in ways that seemed to defy their anatomical limitations. The variety is extensive, I said. Captain, interrupted Lieutenant Zilar, entering the analysis chamber with an urgent stride, we have received another transmission from the High Council. They are demanding a status update on the invasion preparations. The word invasion jolted me from my artistic contemplation. I'd almost forgotten our primary mission. Tell them. I hesitated. Tell them we are conducting additional analysis. Critical new information has come to light. Zilar's 6 eyes blinked in confusion. But Captain, the deployment fleet has already been dispatched. They will arrive in 17 rotations. The news hit me like a gravitational anomaly. 17 rotations until a Vorax battle fleet arrived in Earth orbit. 17 rotations until we enacted our standard protocol on a species we fundamentally misunderstood. Lieutenant, contact the fleet commander immediately. I ordered. Priority Alpha communication. What should I tell them, Captain? I looked around the room at the explosion of human creativity surrounding us. Tell them we may have made a terrible mistake. Fleet Commander Draxus was not known for his flexibility. His 7 campaign medallions were earned through strict adherence to Vorax military doctrine. You want me to delay a fully mobilized invasion fleet because of pictures? His voice dripped with skepticism even through the distortion of interstellar communication. Not just pictures, Commander, I replied, struggling to maintain protocol-appropriate respect. Evidence that our assessment of human civilization is fundamentally flawed. The High Council approved this operation based on your preliminary reports, Captain Karax. Draxus reminded me, reports that you yourself submitted. I'm aware, Commander, but new information requires new conclusions. The humans are different. Draxus's facial tendrils twitched with irritation. Different how, precisely? How could I explain? How could I convey the significance of a Beethoven symphony, a Van Gogh painting, or a Shakespeare play to a military commander who viewed conquest as a mathematical equation? They encode complex information in non-literal forms, I tried. They deliberately create ambiguous communication methods. Captain, interrupted Draxus, are the humans or are they not a Class 7 pre-interstellar species engaged in ongoing warfare and environmental degradation? Well, yes, technically. Do they or do they not possess nuclear weapons and primitive space travel capabilities? They do, but then the assessment stands, declared Draxus. The invasion proceeds as scheduled. I felt my upper limbs tense with frustration. Commander, I formally request a mission parameter reassessment based on critical new cultural data. Request denied, Captain Karax. Your research vessel is to maintain observation protocols and prepare for fleet arrival. Draxus out. The communication ended abruptly, leaving me staring at a blank screen. What now, Captain? Asked Zilar, who had witnessed the exchange. A plan was already forming in my mind, one that would violate at least 17 Vorax protocols and possibly end my career. But after experiencing humanity's artistic output, I couldn't stand by and watch their culture be subjugated by beings who couldn't understand what made it valuable. Lieutenant Zilar, prepare a shuttle, I ordered. We are going to need a human. Finding the right human proved challenging. We needed someone who could comprehend the gravity of the situation, someone who could help us communicate the significance of human art to the inflexible minds of the Vorax High Council. What about this one? Suggested Trelex, displaying the profile of a human female on the main screen. Dr. Amara Patel, cultural anthropologist specializing in the intersection of art and society. I studied the information. Academic credentials are suitable, but we need someone with practical artistic experience as well. Perhaps a combination approach, offered Zilar. This human here, Jason Burke, he creates these visual narratives called comic books that combine storytelling and imagery. Add him to the consideration list, I said. For 3 rotations, we debated and researched, finally settling on our candidate, Professor Lydia Nolan, an artist who also taught comparative alien mythology at a human educational institution. The irony wasn't lost on me. The extraction went smoothly, perhaps too smoothly. Our stealth technology allowed us to bring her aboard without incident, though her reaction upon waking in our medical bay was less than ideal. What the actual hell? The human's voice reached a frequency that made our auditory receptors vibrate painfully. Please modulate your vocal output, I requested, approaching her examination platform with what I hoped was a non-threatening posture. Professor Nolan scrambled backward until she hit the wall of the medical bay, her respiratory rate increasing dramatically. You are. I am Captain Karax of the Vorax research vessel Relentless Inquiry, I said calmly. We apologize for the unexpected transport, but we face a time-sensitive situation. You are aliens. Actual aliens. Her ocular organs had widened to an alarming degree. Correct. And we need your help to prevent the invasion of your planet. This statement did not have the calming effect I'd anticipated. Professor Nolan's face drained of coloration, and for a moment I feared she might lose consciousness. Invasion? You are planning to invade Earth? Not us specifically, clarified Zilar, who perhaps should have remained silent based on the human's startled reaction to another Vorpus voice. Just our entire military fleet. Which is why we brought you here, I continued, shooting Zilar a silencing glare. We believe we have made a significant error in our assessment of human civilization, specifically regarding your artistic and cultural output. Professor Nolan stared at us, her expression shifting from terror to confusion. You abducted me to talk about art. Precisely, I confirmed, relieved that she understood so quickly. We have 17 correction, now 14 rotations before the arrival of the Vorax invasion fleet. We need to convince our leaders that humans possess unique cultural value that warrants reconsideration of conquest protocols. The human made a strange sound, a sharp exhalation combined with vocal modulation. It took a moment for our translators to recognize it as laughter, though it contained notes of hysteria rather than amusement. This is insane, she said, more to herself than to us. Completely insane. I'm hallucinating. Or dreaming. That's it, I'm dreaming. I assure you, Professor Nolan, this is quite real, I said, and extremely urgent. Will you help us? She looked around the medical bay, taking in the unfamiliar technology and the decidedly non-human appearance of our research team. Do I have a choice? She asked. An excellent question, one that highlighted the ethical complexity of our actions. We'd violated our own protocols by making direct contact, and we'd violated human autonomy by bringing her aboard without consent. Yes, I said finally, if you choose not to assist us, we will return you to Earth immediately. With appropriate memory modification, of course. Memory modification. She sounded alarmed again. Standard procedure for accidental contact scenarios, explained Trellix. Completely harmless. Professor Nolan took several deep breaths, a human calming technique we'd observed in our research. So either I help you convince your leaders not to invade Earth, or you erase my memory and send me back just in time to be invaded anyway. That is an accurate assessment of the options, I confirmed. She laughed again, this time with a distinct edge of bitterness. Some choice. After a moment she straightened her posture in a way that reminded me of a Vorax officer preparing to address a superior. Show me what you know about human art so far. Let's see what we are working with. Professor Nolan proved to be an ideal cultural interpreter. After her initial shock subsided, her academic curiosity took over. She moved through our collection of human artifacts with growing amazement, occasionally correcting our misconceptions, but more often expanding our understanding. You have got a really random assortment here, she noted, examining our painting collection. Thrift store finds, you said? That explains it. You have got everything from amateur landscapes to what looks like a college student's attempt at cubism. The variety was confusing, admitted Trellix. We couldn't determine the correct aesthetic standard. Professor Nolan smiled. That's because there isn't one. Human art isn't about correctness. It's about expression, connection, emotion. Sometimes just experimentation. This concept remained difficult for the research team to grasp. Vorax culture valued standardization and clarity of purpose. The deliberate ambiguity of human art seemed counterproductive. But how do you determine which artistic output is superior? Asked Zilar. We argue about it constantly, Nolan replied with a laugh. For thousands of years, that's part of the point. Over the next few rotations, Professor Nolan gave what she called the world's most important crash course in human cultural studies. She helped us organize our random collection into historical and stylistic categories, explaining the context behind different artistic movements. "This is what we call Renaissance art," she explained, showing us images from her digital device, which our engineers had modified to interface with our systems. "Notice the focus on human form, perspective, religious themes. And this is the same species creating this?" I asked, indicating another image with chaotic splashes of color. "Abstract expressionism. Yes, same species but different time period, different cultural context, different intent." She navigated to another image. "And this is digital concept art for a video game about space exploration. Same species, different medium, different purpose." The range was staggering. Humans created art using every material available to them, in styles that ranged from photorealistic to completely abstract, with purposes spanning from pure decoration to political protest to religious worship. "But why?" I finally asked. "Why devote so much time and resources to creating things that have no practical function?" Professor Nolan considered the question carefully. "But they do have a function, Captain Carax. Art helps us understand ourselves and each other. It helps us process experiences we can't easily put into direct language. It connects us across time and space." She gestured to the collection around us. "This is how we make sense of being alive." The concept was alien to Vorak's thinking, yet undeniably compelling. With each rotation, my certainty grew. We had fundamentally misjudged humanity. Their warfare and environmental issues were real, but they were only part of a far more complex picture. "We need to show this to the High Council," I declared. "Not just reports or samples. They need to experience it directly." "How?" asked Zilar. "The Council won't leave the homeworld for something as trivial as a pre-invasion cultural assessment." An idea formed, dangerous, unprecedented, but potentially our only option. "Then we bring the experience to them." I said, "Professor Nolan, how would you feel about creating the most important artistic installation in human history?" Her eyes widened as she grasped my meaning. "You want me to create something that will change your leaders' minds about invading Earth? Something that captures the essence of human artistic expression?" "Precisely. No pressure or anything," she muttered, using human sarcasm. Then she straightened. "I will need materials, lots of materials, and helpers." "You will have whatever you require," I promised. "And one more thing," she added. "I need to go back to Earth. Just briefly. There are people I want to bring in on this." "Out of the question," said Zilar immediately. "The protocol violations are already severe." "The lieutenant is correct," I agreed reluctantly. "We cannot risk further direct contact." Professor Nolan fixed me with a stare that somehow made me feel like the less advanced species. "Captain, you have abducted me to save the planet through an art project. I think we are way past worrying about protocol. Besides, you need more than just me. You need a team of human artists, each specializing in different forms. Otherwise, you are not getting the full picture." She was right, of course. A single human, however knowledgeable, couldn't represent the full spectrum of human artistic expression. And with only 11 rotations remaining before the fleet's arrival, we needed to act boldly. "Prepare a shuttle," I ordered Zilar, "and a secure landing site. We are going to Earth." The lieutenant's facial tendrils twisted in shock. "Captain, this is beyond protocol violation. This is treason." "No, Lieutenant," I replied, my resolve hardening. "This is preventing a tragic mistake. The real treason would be allowing the destruction of a civilization we have failed to understand." As Zilar reluctantly departed to prepare the shuttle, Professor Nolan approached me. "Thank you, Captain," she said quietly. "But I have to ask why? Why go against your own people to help mine?" I considered the question, trying to articulate something I barely understood myself. "Because," I finally said, "in all our explorations of 17 star systems and hundreds of sentient species, we have never encountered a civilization that creates beauty for its own sake. Your art reveals something about humanity that our scanning technology and surveillance couldn't detect." I gestured to the collections surrounding us. "You imagine worlds that don't exist. You find meaning in ambiguity. You deliberately create things with multiple interpretations. It's fascinating." Professor Nolan smiled. "Welcome to humanity, Captain Carax. We are messy, contradictory, and we spend a lot of time making things that serve no practical purpose. But it's what makes us who we are." "And that," I replied, "is precisely why you are worth saving." As we prepared to depart for Earth, I couldn't help wondering if I was making yet another terrible mistake. But after experiencing human art, I was willing to risk everything to preserve the species that created it, because a universe without humanity's creative voice would be a much poorer place indeed. Landing on Earth without detection required every technological advantage of our stealth systems. We chose a remote location in what humans called New Mexico, apparently a common setting for fictional alien encounters. Professor Nolan found this amusing for reasons I couldn't fully comprehend. "So," she said as our shuttle settled into a desert clearing, "just to be clear on the plan, we are going to gather a team of Earth's most talented artists. Bring them to your spaceship and create a multimedia presentation so powerful it will convince your leaders not to destroy our civilization." "Correct," I confirmed. "All within 11 days? 10.7 of your Earth rotations, to be precise." She took a deep breath. "No problem. I do this kind of thing all the time." Lieutenant Zilar's translation implant struggled with the concept of sarcasm. "You regularly create art to prevent planetary invasions." "No, Zilar. That was a joke," I explained, having become somewhat more adept at recognizing human humor. "Professor Nolan is using irony to highlight the absurdity of our situation." "Ah," said Zilar, though his confusion remained evident in his posture. Professor Nolan pulled out her communication device. "I'm going to need to make some calls. My colleagues will have questions that, well, let's just say I'm working with aliens to save the world isn't typically a convincing project pitch. Perhaps direct evidence would be helpful," I suggested, gesturing to our distinctly non-human forms. "Yeah, that will work," she agreed. "But we need a secure meeting place. My apartment isn't exactly equipped for an intergalactic summit." After some discussion, we settled on an abandoned warehouse Professor Nolan knew through an artist friend. The space was large enough to accommodate our needs and isolated enough to minimize detection risks. "I will arrange transport," she said, tapping at her device. "My car isn't big enough for—" "How many of you are coming?" "Just myself and Lieutenant Zilar," I decided. "The rest of the crew will remain with the shuttle." As Professor Nolan made her arrangements, I contemplated our dwindling timeline. 10 rotations until the fleet arrived. 10 rotations to change the course of 2 civilizations. The human artists arrived in small groups over the next planetary rotation. Each reacted with varying degrees of shock, disbelief, and eventually excitement upon seeing actual extraterrestrials. Professor Nolan had selected them carefully, diverse in their artistic disciplines, but united in their ability to work under pressure. "Everyone, this is Captain Karax and Lieutenant Zaya of the Vorax." She introduced us to the assembled humans. "They have come to warn us about an impending invasion, and we have approximately 9 days to create something that will change their leaders' minds." A tall human male with decorated skin, tattoos, I later learned they were called, raised his hand. "So we are, what, making art to save the world? Like in that movie with the giant robots?" "Not exactly like that, Marcus," Professor Nolan replied, "but essentially yes." "Cool," he said, surprisingly unfazed. "I'm in." Not all the humans were so immediately accepting. A woman with brightly colored hair demanded proof that we weren't elaborate performance artists in costumes. Zilar obliged by demonstrating our ability to change skin luminescence, a feature unique to Vorax physiology. "Okay," she said after a moment of stunned silence. "That's legitimately alien. I'm Renee, by the way, sound designer." One by one, they introduced themselves. Marcus Rivera, visual artist specializing in large-scale installations. Renee Park, sound designer and composer Jackson Thompson. Dancer and choreographer Daria Volkov. Filmmaker and holographic artist Talib Hassan. Poet and spoken word performer Wei Ling. Virtual reality programmer. Each brought unique skills and perspectives that Professor Nolan assured me represented important facets of human artistic expression. "We need to create something immersive," she explained to the group, "something that captures not just what human art looks like, but what it feels like, why we make it, what it means to us." "A tall order with aliens as our audience," observed Talib. "We don't even share the same sensory apparatus." "Actually," I interjected, "Vorax sensory systems are more extensive than human ones. We perceive a wider range of the electromagnetic spectrum and have more acute audio reception." "Perfect," exclaimed Daria, the filmmaker. "We can create something multi-layered, something that works on multiple sensory levels simultaneously. The humans quickly moved into brainstorming mode, their creative energy palpable even to my alien perception. They argued, sketched, demonstrated, sometimes talked over each other in their enthusiasm. It was chaotic by Vor's standards, yet somehow productive. "What about the invasion fleet?" Zilar whispered to me as we observed the humans at work. "Shouldn't we be contacting the High Council directly?" "Not yet," I replied. "Without compelling evidence, they won't listen. We need this to work." By the end of that rotation, the human team had developed a concept, an immersive installation they called Humanity in 4 Dimensions. It would combine visual art, music, movement, poetry, and interactive elements to create what the programmer called a full sensory dive into the human experience of art. "We will need equipment," said Professor Nolan. "Lots of it." "Make a list," I told her. "We will procure what you need." 7 rotations before the fleet's arrival, our makeshift studio was transformed into an artistic laboratory. Equipment filled every corner: projectors, sound systems, fabrication tools, and various human computers. The Vorax shuttle crew had been enlisted to help transport materials and provide technological assistance. Professor Nolan coordinated the chaos with remarkable efficiency, assigning tasks and integrating the disparate elements into a cohesive vision. I found myself increasingly impressed by the humans' ability to collaborate despite their different artistic languages. "Captain," called Daria, waving me over to her workstation, "I need your input on this sequence." She showed me a visual composition depicting Earth's history through artistic evolution, cave paintings morphing into classical sculpture, transforming into Renaissance paintings, evolving into photography, film, and finally digital art. "Will your leaders understand the chronological significance?" she asked. "The time scale should be made explicit," I advised. "Vorax value precision." She nodded and made adjustments, adding numerical markers to indicate the thousands of years represented. Across the room, Renee was working with Talib on what they called the soundscape, a complex audio composition that would accompany the visual elements. "We are layering spoken word over musical elements from different human cultures," Renee explained when I approached. "The poetry addresses why humans create art. I have incorporated concepts of beauty, meaning, connection," added Talib, "the universal aspects that transcend cultural differences." "Would you like to hear a sample?" Renee offered. I nodded and they activated their composition. The sound filled my auditory receptors, a complex blend of instrumental vibrations, human voices speaking in multiple languages, ambient natural sounds, and rhythmic patterns that seemed to complement rather than compete with each other. "The translation won't be perfect for the poetic elements," Talib warned, "but the emotion should come through." Indeed, even without complete linguistic comprehension, the composition evoked something I couldn't quite name, a resonance that seemed to bypass rational thought. "It's affecting," I admitted. Renee smiled. "Good. That's exactly what we want." Meanwhile, Jackson was working with several human assistants on the movement component, a choreographed piece that would be performed live as part of the presentation. "Dance communicates what words can't," he explained as his team demonstrated a sequence. "The universal language of bodies in space." Their movements seemed random at first, but gradually I discerned patterns: tension and release, unity and separation, expressions of conflict and harmony. "This represents humanity's contradictions," Jackson said. "Our capacity for both destruction and creation." In another section, Wei and Marcus collaborated on an interactive installation that would allow the Vorax Council members to directly engage with human creative processes. "It's a simplified version of our VR creation platform," Wei explained, showing me a device that would translate Vorax neural patterns into visual elements. "They can essentially create art with their thoughts," added Marcus, experiencing firsthand what it feels like to manifest imagination into form. The scope of the project was ambitious, perhaps impossibly so given our timeline. Yet watching the humans work, I felt something unfamiliar. Hope. 4 rotations before fleet arrival, disaster struck. Our sensors detected a Vorax scout vessel entering Earth orbit, an advance team for the coming invasion. "They are scanning for us," reported Science Officer Trelax over our secure channel. "The relentless inquiry remains undetected, but they have noted the absence of our regular status reports." "Have they detected our shuttle?" I asked. Negative, Captain, but they are deploying surface probes. It's only a matter of time. This complicated matters significantly. If the scout vessel discovered our direct contact with humans, they would report immediately to Fleet Commander Draxus, eliminating any chance we had of reaching the High Council. We need to accelerate our timeline, I told Professor Nolan and her team. The situation has become more urgent. We are working as fast as we can, she replied, the stress evident in her voice, but rushing art rarely produces good results. Nevertheless, we must adapt. How soon can we have something presentable? The human artists exchanged glances. 2 days, said Daria finally, minimum, and it won't be everything we planned. 2 rotations will have to suffice, I said. Focus on the most impactful elements. As the humans redoubled their efforts, Zilar approached me with concern evident in his posture. Captain, we should return to the ship, he urged quietly. If we are discovered here, it's not just our careers at stake. The penalty for unauthorized first contact is severe. I'm aware of the consequences, Lieutenant, I replied, but we have committed to this course. We see it through. And if we fail? I considered the question. Then at least we will have tried to prevent an unnecessary war. Zilar's facial tendrils twitched thoughtfully. You have changed, Captain. The old Karex would never have risked so much for an alien species. Perhaps he was right. My exposure to human art had altered something fundamental in my perception. Where once I saw only a problematic species requiring management, I now recognized a civilization with unique value to the galactic community. Sometimes, Lieutenant, growth requires risk, I said. Now help Professor Nolan's team with the neural interface calibrations. We have much to accomplish and very little time. 3 rotations before fleet arrival, we received alarming news from the Relentless Inquiry. Captain, the scout vessel has detected unusual energy signatures in your vicinity, reported Trelex. They are dispatching investigation drones. How long until they reach our position? I asked. Approximately 6 Earth hours. Not enough time to complete our work, but perhaps enough to relocate. I gathered the human team for an emergency briefing. We need to move our operation to the ship, I announced, immediately. What about the installation components? Asked Marcus. Some of them are too large to transport quickly. Bring what's essential, I instructed. We will adapt the rest. The next hours passed in frantic activity as the humans dismantled their creation and packed critical elements. The Vorax shuttle crew assisted, transporting equipment in multiple trips to avoid detection. By the time the investigation drones reached the warehouse, we had evacuated completely, leaving behind only a few non-essential items that would appear as abandoned human projects to casual inspection. Aboard the Relentless Inquiry, the human artist reacted with predictable awe to their first experience of spaceflight. Under different circumstances, I would have allowed them time to adjust. Instead, we immediately set up a new workspace in the ship's central chamber. Impressive digs, commented Renee, looking around at the advanced Vorax technology. Focus, people, urged Professor Nolan. We have lost time and space. We need to adapt our concept. Actually, said Wei, examining the ship's holographic projection system, this technology could work to our advantage. It's far more sophisticated than what we had on Earth. Can you integrate your programming with our systems? I asked. With some help from your technical crew, absolutely. I assigned 3 Vorax engineers to assist the human team. Despite the language and conceptual barriers, they quickly developed a working interface between human creative software and Vorax presentation technology. 2 rotations before fleet arrival, we received a transmission from the High Council. I took it in my private chamber, aware that this could end our mission before it began. Captain Karex, said Council Elder Vrakes, her aged face filling my screen, your absence from regular reporting protocols has been noted. Explain. Elder, I replied with appropriate deference. We have been conducting intensive research on human artistic production. Our findings are significant enough to violate communication protocols. Her tone was skeptical. Yes, Elder, we believe the Vorax assessment of human civilization requires complete revision. We request an emergency council audience. Elder Vrax's facial tendrils twisted in surprise. On what grounds? Cultural complexity exceeding all predictive models, evidence of unique creative capacity unmatched in any previously catalogued species. Captain, the invasion fleet is already en route. Deployment plans are finalized, which is why time is critical, Elder. We are preparing a presentation that will demonstrate why humans should be reclassified. She studied me through the screen, her ancient eyes searching for deception. Finally, she said, "Very well, the Council will grant you a brief audience. Transmit your presentation within 1 rotation. With respect, Elder, this cannot be adequately conveyed through transmission. We request permission to present in person." Her facial tendrils went rigid with shock. "You wish to bring humans before the Council? Unprecedented. The situation warrants unprecedented measures," I replied firmly. A long silence followed. I could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes, weighing protocol against curiosity, tradition against potential discovery. 1 rotation, she finally said. "The Council will convene in 1 rotation. You may bring 2 human representatives. No more." The transmission ended before I could respond. I stood motionless for a moment, processing the implications. We had our audience, but only 2 humans could present, and we had less than 1 rotation to finalize our presentation. When I informed the human team, their reaction was mixed. "2 people," exclaimed Jackson. "The dance component alone requires 4 performers." "We will have to adapt," said Professor Nolan, ever practical. "We focus on the most impactful elements and condense everything else." "But who goes?" asked Talib. "Who represents all of humanity?" An excellent question, and one I left the humans to resolve among themselves. Their discussion was passionate but respectful, each advocating for the importance of their artistic discipline while acknowledging the others. In the end, they reached a consensus. Professor Nolan would go as the project's originator and a scholar capable of contextualizing human art historically. The second position went to Wei, whose programming expertise would allow her to operate the complex multimedia presentation they had designed. "The rest of us will contribute by finalizing content," said Daria. "Every artistic discipline will be represented, even if we can't all be there in person." Their collaborative spirit continued to impress me. Even facing the literal end of their world, these humans worked together with minimal conflict, each contributing their unique talents toward a common goal. 1 rotation before fleet arrival, we made final preparations for our Council appearance. The human team worked tirelessly, refining their presentation and adapting it for the limitations of our audience arrangement. "Remember," Professor Nolan coached Wei as they rehearsed, "the Vorax value precision and logic. We need to show how art embodies these qualities while transcending them." "Got it," Wei replied, making adjustments to her programming sequence. Logic with emotion, structure with surprise. I observed their preparations with growing anxiety. Would the Council truly understand what these humans were attempting to convey? Could Vorax's perception, evolved in such different conditions, truly grasp the significance of human artistic expression? As the ship prepared for hyperspace transit to the Vorax homeworld, I found Professor Nolan alone in the observation deck staring out at the Earth below. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said without turning. "Even from here." I joined her at the viewport. "It is unique in our experience. The variety of biomes, the color palette. And you were going to subjugate it all because we fight too much and don't manage our resources perfectly." Her tone contained no accusation, merely a statement of fact. "The Vorax believe in optimizing civilizations," I explained. "When species demonstrate self-destructive tendencies, we intervene. By force." "Yes." She turned to face me. "And you don't see the contradiction? Using destruction to prevent destruction?" The question lingered between us, highlighting a paradox in Vork's philosophy I had never fully examined. "Perhaps," I admitted, "our approach requires reconsideration." "That's why art matters, Captain Carrix. It helps us see contradictions, question assumptions, imagine alternatives." "A useful function indeed," I acknowledged. "One we may have overlooked in our assessment of sentient value." She smiled slightly. "There's hope for you Vorax yet." The Vorax High Council chamber was designed to intimidate. Massive crystal columns supported a domed ceiling etched with the mathematical equations that governed our civilization. The 12 council elders sat on elevated platforms, their ancient faces impassive as we entered. Professor Nolan and Wei showed remarkable composure, though their elevated heart rates betrayed their nervousness to my sensitive hearing. "Captain Carax," intoned Elder Vrex, "you stand before the Council with unauthorized alien visitors and a request to halt a military operation already in progress. Your justification must be compelling. Esteemed elders, I present Professor Lydia Nolan and Wei Ling of Earth. They come not as representatives of human government, but as ambassadors of human culture. Culture is irrelevant to invasion assessment, stated Elder Drox dismissively. Military capability and resource management are the established metrics. With respect, Elder, I replied, I believe our metrics are incomplete. These humans have prepared a demonstration that may alter your perspective. Elder Vrax gestured permission to proceed. You have 1/4 rotation, Captain. Use it wisely. Professor Nolan stepped forward, her voice steady despite the intimidating audience. Honorable Council, we understand you judge civilizations by their efficiency, technological development, and self-governance. Today we ask you to consider another measure, creative capacity. She nodded to Wei, who activated the presentation program. Immediately, the council chamber transformed. Holographic projections surrounded the elders, cave paintings from Earth's earliest humans, gradually evolving into more sophisticated artistic expressions through millennia of development. Human art isn't merely decorative, continued Professor Nolan, as the images flowed around us. It's how we process our existence, how we communicate across barriers of time, language, and understanding. Music began to play. A composition Renee had created that interwove elements from diverse human musical traditions into a harmonious whole. Simultaneously, poetry in multiple human languages appeared as text, with Vorax translations alongside. Some council members shifted uncomfortably, but none interrupted. We humans are imperfect, acknowledged Professor Nolan. We fight wars, we damage our environment, we struggle with governance, but we also create beauty that questions our own existence. Art that challenges our assumptions, music that expresses what words cannot. We activated the neural interface component, extending sensory tendrils toward the council members. With your permission, she said, this will allow you to experience human creativity directly, translated into neural patterns your physiology can interpret. After a hesitant moment, Elder Vrax nodded permission. The other elders followed her example, connecting to the interface. What followed was beyond verbal description. The essence of human creative expression, the joy, sorrow, wonder, and questioning inherent in their art, flowed directly into Vorthak's consciousness. I observed the elders' reactions with fascination. Their facial tendrils trembled, their skin luminescence fluctuated in patterns I'd never seen before. For 20 Earth minutes, the council chamber became a nexus of cross-species understanding through artistic communication. When the presentation finally ended, silence fell. Elder Vrax was the first to speak, her voice uncharacteristically soft. In 17,000 cycles of Vorax exploration, she said, we have never encountered anything like this. The emotional complexity, murmured Elder Drox, who moments ago had dismissed culture as irrelevant. The deliberate ambiguity designed to provoke individual interpretation, the mathematical patterns within their music, added Elder Krells, simultaneously precise and unpredictable. Professor Nolan stepped forward again. This is humanity, honored council, contradictory, imperfect, but capable of creating meaning from chaos, of finding beauty in struggle, of questioning our own existence through art. And you believe this justifies halting the invasion? Asked Elder Vrax. We believe, I interjected, that humanity offers something unique to the galactic community, something that would be lost forever if we proceed with standard conquest protocols. We spoke up, her voice calm and measured. Your species values efficiency and optimization. Consider the inefficiency of destroying a civilization capable of creating experiences your council found compelling. Wouldn't it be more logical to preserve this unique capacity, to learn from it? The council members exchanged glances, communicating in the subtle Vorax language of facial tendril movements and skin luminescence patterns. Finally, Elder Vrax turned to us. The council requires private deliberation. You will await our decision. We were escorted to an antechamber, where Professor Nolan immediately collapsed into a sitting position. Did we do enough? She asked, exhaustion evident in her voice. You were magnificent, I assured her, both of you. The council's reaction was unprecedented. But will it stop the fleet? Pressed. That, I admitted, I cannot predict. We waited in tense silence. 1 hour passed, then 2. Finally, a council attendant appeared. The council will see you now. We returned to the chamber where Elder Vrax addressed us without preamble. The Vorax High Council has reached a decision. The invasion of Earth is hereby suspended. Professor Nolan exhaled sharply, tears forming in her ocular organs. Wei gripped her arm in what appeared to be a human gesture of shared emotion. However, continued Elder Vox, this suspension comes with conditions. We propose instead a cultural exchange program. Vorax researchers will continue to study human artistic production. Selected humans will be invited to share their creative processes with our scientists. A cultural exchange instead of an invasion, Professor Nolan said, her voice thick with emotion. We accept those terms. Fleet Commander Draxus has been ordered to establish orbit around Earth, not as an invasion force but as the first wave of cultural researchers, explained Elder Vrax. Captain Carax, in recognition of your unorthodox but ultimately valuable insights, you will oversee the initial exchange program. I struggle to maintain proper Vorthax composure. I am honored. Elder, this decision was not unanimous, warned Elder Vorax, with a pointed look at several council members. Some believe we are setting a dangerous precedent. Your exchange program must demonstrate concrete value to justify this deviation from standard protocols. It will, promised Professor Nolan. Humanity has much to share. As we departed the council chamber, I felt a strange sensation I eventually identified as pride, not in myself but in what we had accomplished together. A Vorax captain and a group of human artists had changed the course of two civilizations through nothing more powerful than creative expression. So, said Professor Nolan as our ship prepared for the return journey to Earth, what happens now? Now, I replied, we begin the real work of understanding each other, not through conquest, but through exchange. Will your people actually understand us? Asked Wei. Art isn't always easy to interpret, even for humans. Perhaps not immediately, I acknowledged, but the Council experienced something today they couldn't dismiss. Something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about sentient value. Professor Nolan smiled. That's what art does best. As our ship emerged from hyperspace near Earth, we received a transmission from Fleet Commander Draxus, whose massive vessels now approached Earth not as conquerors but as visitors. Captain Carax, he said, his voice stiff with barely concealed irritation, the High Council has assigned me to your cultural project. Welcome to the exchange program, Commander. I replied, unable to suppress a hint of satisfaction. I believe you will find it most enlightening. We shall see, he said dubiously. My ships are establishing non-aggressive orbit patterns to avoid alarming the humans, though they remain unaware of our presence. About that, I said, glancing at Professor Nolan, there may be a small matter of disclosure to address. In the Earth year that followed, humanity experienced what their historians would later call First Contact Renaissance. The revelation that they were not alone in the universe, delivered carefully through Professor Nolan's academic connections rather than massive ships appearing in the sky, triggered an explosion of new artistic expression. Vorax researchers, initially bewildered by human creativity, gradually developed appreciation for everything from symphony orchestras to street graffiti. Some even began experimenting with creative expression themselves, a radical development in our highly structured society. Commander Draxus, to everyone's surprise, developed a particular fondness for what humans called jazz, with its mathematical improvisation and structured spontaneity. I often found him in the Cultural Exchange Center, listening to recordings with his eyes closed in concentration. The randomness has patterns, he explained when I questioned this interest. Chaos with purpose. Most intriguing. As for me, I was permanently assigned to Earth as Cultural Exchange Director, a position that allowed me to continue exploring the endless varieties of human artistic expression. I even attempted creating art myself, clumsy efforts that Professor Nolan kindly described as showing promising originality. The Vorax High Council, true to form, required quantifiable results from our exchange. We provided them in unexpected ways. Human artistic approaches led to innovations in Vorax technology, architectural design, even medical treatment. The deliberate ambiguity of art, it turned out, stimulated neural pathways that pure logic left dormant. In my official reports, I quantified these benefits meticulously, satisfying the Council's demand for measurable value. But in my private logs, I recorded a different kind of value, the transformation happening within Vorax society as we learned to appreciate beauty without purpose, meaning without precision, expression without utility. You know, Professor Nolan told me one day as we observed a mixed group of humans and Vorics collaborating on a massive installation, you never did tell me why you decided to risk everything to save us.
I considered the question carefully.
I believe it was when I first heard music that Jazz Commander Draxus now finds so fascinating. I realized then that humanity creates not despite your imperfections, but because of them. Your art emerges from your struggles, your questions, your awareness of your own limitations. And that seemed worth saving. More than that, I replied, watching the collaborative artwork take shape. It seemed necessary, not just for your species, but for ours as well. Without exposure to human creativity, the Vordax might have continued for thousands of cycles, perfectly logical and utterly stagnant. She smiled. So we saved each other. A more poetic conclusion than I would have formulated, I acknowledged, but essentially correct. And so two civilizations that might have met in conquest instead found connection through creation. The universe, it seemed, had room for both logic and beauty, precision and poetry, analysis and art. The Vorics had indeed made a terrible mistake in our initial assessment of humanity. But fortunately, humans had shown us a better way. As their art had so eloquently demonstrated, sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from acknowledging what we don't understand, and sometimes the most valuable discoveries arise from our most profound mistakes.